Over the past few months, President Trump has deployed troops into Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Portland, and Chicago with the stated intention of protecting ICE agents and federal property and to restore the safety and security for the city's residents. Democratic governors and mayors have reacted with outrage. At one level, their frustration seemed to be an outgrowth of the overarching narrative that Trump represents an existential threat to democracy, and his troop deployments are the beginning of a hostile takeover of democratic enclaves. At a second, more granular level, Trump's opponents have made a series of legal and political charges regarding these actions, including that the deployments are 1. A violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which restricts the use of the military for domestic law enforcement unless specifically authorized by the Constitution or Congress. 2. An infringement of states' rights and local control in a manner that threatens the balance of power between the federal government and states and municipalities. 3. Politically motivated to create a misleading narrative of lawlessness in democratic jurisdictions. 4. An escalation of tensions that could provoke a violent response, endanger citizens, and have a chilling effect on free speech and the right to assemble. And 5, an affront to local law enforcement and a misuse of military resources. Hi, I'm Todd, and I've had the good fortune to live the American dream and watch that dream become a reality for many others. These podcasts and my free Substack newsletter are my way of passing on some of what I've learned along the way. Unraveling the thorny issues behind the administration's immigration policy and troop deployments into big cities are critical to helping make America work for all of our citizens. After a short break, we'll come back to look further at these important issues. The grassroots belief by the rank and file in the Democratic Party that Trump is a dictator thinly disguised in Republican robes is demonstrated by the No Kings marches and the movement's website, which states, "The world saw the power of the people, and President Trump's attempt at a coronation collapsed under the strength of a movement rising against his abuses of power. Now he's doubling down, sending militarized agents into our communities, silencing voters, and handing billionaires giveaways while families struggle. This isn't just politics, it's democracy versus dictatorship." And, just in case you're wondering how the faction that really despises Trump feels, here's what their most recent presidential nominee, Kamala Harris, had to say. He wants a military like Adolf Hitler had, who will be loyal to him, not to our Constitution. But if the deployment of military personnel into the blue cities represented an authoritarian takeover, then we would expect to find an initial deployment and either a takeover of key city and state functions by the occupying troops, or if the coup failed, an escalation of troop activity. But so far, this is not what has happened. Let's look at Los Angeles, where troops were first deployed. Trump initially sent 800 troops into LA in June. As some protesters responded with violence, the count quickly escalated to around 4,700. But there was no takeover of city or state functions, and after things quieted down, the vast majority of these troops were removed. According to Governor Newsom's own website, the number of troops remaining in the city is now down to 300, a drop of over 90% from the peak. Suffice to say, in spite of all the incendiary rhetoric here, this bears little resemblance to Hitler's blitzkrieg into Poland in 1939. So let's move on to some of the more granular criticisms, starting with the allegation that Trump is steamrolling the rule of law in his allegedly ruthless pursuit of authoritarian power. Trump's opponents are effectively arguing that he is threatening the rule of law by enforcing existing immigration laws. Just to be clear, my own personal preference would be to focus on deporting criminals and recent arrivals and letting those who have a lengthy record of working and contributing to the economy stay. But admittedly, this is in effect advocating for breaking the rule of law. While my position may sound more humane, it is nevertheless the one on shaky legal grounds. And such is also true for Trump's blue state resistors, which only makes their charge that he is steamrolling the rule of law by enforcing existing laws even more misleading. Now, the argument that the deployments represent an unauthorized use of military force that threatens the balance of federal and state power is another matter. Further, the charge that the actions are motivated by purely political purposes also effectively implies a lack of legal standing. Now, of course, it's not hard to find scholars making arguments on either side of these issues. After all, that's what our adversarial legal system is all about, right? Unfortunately, many commentators resort to simply trotting out whatever scholars support their own views. But there's a more balanced way to look at this. Fortunately, the legal basis of Trump's deployment is not being determined in the court of one-sided political commentary, but rather by judges who have devoted their careers to the law, are hearing both sides of the argument, and are part of an appellate system that provides a check on misguided decisions. Rather than pulling our hair out, or for some of us, at least what's left of it, over the legality of Trump's actions, we could just trust the legal system. But for Trump's opponents, who have seen a number of rulings go against them, this doesn't seem to be an acceptable alternative, which makes it look to me as if they are only interested in the rule of law to the extent the law is ruled as they see fit. I believe the best course here is to simply look at whether or not Trump is complying with the decisions being handed down by the judicial system. Let's look at Portland and Chicago, where the courts are currently in the process of sorting the legal issues out. In Portland, Trump has authorized 200 troops. There are ICE agents present in the city, and other troops have been mobilized and placed in the area, but there are currently no troops deployed in the city. Likewise, in Chicago, 500 troops have been authorized, and some are nearby awaiting instructions, but none are currently deployed within the city itself. To summarize, in spite of all the legal rhetoric, it seems that the real issue here is that Trump's opponents don't like the existing immigration laws, want those laws enforced only as they see fit, and have pretty much the same views about the judicial system's decisions. Now let's look at who's inciting violence. Especially in LA, Portland, and Chicago, state and local leaders have often responded with highly confrontational and even incendiary attacks on Trump, ICE agents, and troops. But keep in mind, as noted earlier, the ICE agents have been sent in to enforce existing laws, not to overrun them. And the troops have been in to help support and protect ICE officers and federal property in a manner that is consistent with judicial rulings. So far, the troops appear to me to have responded with remarkable restraint in dealing with crowds that have been roused in part by the rhetoric coming from state and local leaders. And there are also many videos of such crowds attempting to provoke a response from enforcement officers and engaging in acts of violence, including burning and ramming cars, throwing inflammable projectiles, and defacing public property. In short, from what I've seen, local and state officials have been far more prone to incendiary rhetoric than has Trump, and protesters are doing more to incite violence than are the ICE agents trying to do their jobs and the troops who have been sent in to protect them. Now let's consider political opportunism. I agree that Trump's own statements and the focus on blue cities both indicate that there is a measure of political opportunism in his troop deployments. Further, as I've previously discussed, I disagree with those in the administration who think immigration is the root of our problems. The real issue we're dealing with is the anemic job growth that has pressured working class opportunity for the past 2.5 decades. If we can reinvigorate economic growth, employers will need more workers, which will increase demand for immigration again. However, it also appears that Trump's opponents are driven by the desire to politicize things themselves by linking the deployments to their long-running narrative that Trump represents an existential threat to democracy. Indeed, imagine how much different things would be right now if the Democratic Party leaders had worked to calm local protesters and had gone on to say they didn't believe the deployments were necessary, but they would nevertheless work with the president to help ensure the safety of ICE agents and federal property and to help ensure the legal rights of all affected individuals, including those here, the immigrants who are here, were honored as everyone went about their jobs. Furthermore, keep in mind, the real inhumanity here was done by the prior administrations that allowed so many illegals to cross the border. Had they simply enforced existing laws, we would not be dealing with the unfortunate human consequences of today's deportations. Fortunately, the ballot box provides the ultimate check on these political matters, and all of us have the right to express our judgment as we see fit when the time comes. My own thinking on these political items is as follows. With respect to Trump sending in the troops to highlight lawlessness, the most important political issue here is the lives of the people trapped in these struggling communities. I believe failed leadership in many of America's largest inner cities is an ongoing and inexcusable tragedy that reflects over half a century of failed policies. Rather than providing safety and security, leaders have for too long allowed urban crime to fester, which has taken way too many lives, including, first and foremost, of those living within the endangered communities. Rather than creating pathways to hard work and upward mobility, policies have trapped inner-city youth in cycles of poverty, dependence, and gang activity. And rather than providing schools that create a pathway to a better future, leaders have remained beholden to teachers' unions that have done everything in their power to protect their educational monopolies. So long as Trump is working to enforce existing laws, and he is doing so in a manner that is consistent with judicial decisions, I support his efforts to show these communities that there are alternatives to the policies that have failed them so tragically for so long. Today we face important challenges, but none that are greater than those we have overcome time and again throughout our storied history. Here's to hoping your day is as bright as America's future. I'm Todd. Thanks for your interest. If you found this helpful, please subscribe and recommend it to at least one other person. If you'd like to learn more and find links to my free On Wealth and Progress newsletter and my book, please visit my website, toddsheetswriter.com. Thanks again.